make some ghee. We've taken organic butter and put it into the pot. You could also use a saucepan, and it would probably cook a little bit faster. We'll get it started, melting the butter and bringing it to a simmer. Ghee is butter that gets cooked to a certain point so that it's a little more extractive than congestive. So we take some of the milk solids out with this process of cooking. Ideally, you would make ghee when the moon is waxing or on the full moon, and avoid making ghee during the other times just to optimize the energy. You know, ghee is something that can bring soothing to the nervous system. We use it for cooking in Ayurveda. We use it medicinally in Ayurveda, both internally and externally. It's sometimes referred to as liquid gold. It's really wonderful stuff. And the butter is melting just now. Ghee is also something that can rejuvenate you. It goes to ojas, our vitality, very quickly, much more quickly than many other foods. So it's useful medicinally in this way as well. So we're just going to let it melt all the way and come to a point where it's bubbling. And then perhaps turn it down, depending on your stove. How long the ghee takes to cook will depend on the temperature in your room, how hot your stove is, the size of the pan. So here we have 2 pounds of butter in this pot. And typically I make 15 pounds at once, so that takes a little longer. But 2 pounds can take in the vicinity of 15, maybe 20 minutes. So the butter is almost melted, and you can hear the sound of the bubbling. We'll go ahead and let it continue to melt, and you can start to see the bubbling in the pot. There's a foam that forms on the top, and the amount of this foam is really dependent on what the cows ate. You'll find that at different times of year that it will be different. If the cows are being grass-fed, then it may stay more similar. But if they're being grain-fed, then it definitely makes a difference, and it changes the color of it as well. So this foam, though, you want to just leave it alone. We really don't want to put anything into the ghee because you risk contaminating it then. While it's coming to a boil, it's nice to say mantra. And I didn't mention that it's really nice to say a mantra right at the very beginning as well. So you can also just be chanting to yourself or praying to yourself all the way through this process. I have it on a medium setting, and it's starting to bubble. So I'm going to start to turn it down. We want to bring it to the point where it's bubbling as it is now, and you can just barely see that bubbling under the foam. And we want to turn it down, though, because I don't want it to splash out of the pan. And I know that on this setting that it could. So I'll start to just go very gradually turning it down. And then you can hear there's another level of bubbling. So we're going to keep it at a simmer, and we'll continue to simmer it until it stops bubbling and stops making that popping sound. Again, for this amount of butter, then it's probably going to be about 20 minutes. I also wanted to mention that you want to be sure to use unsalted butter. You know, the fresher the butter, the better. If you could make your own, then that's fantastic. But definitely we don't want it to be salted, because when you cook it this way, then it concentrates the salt. And better not to have any addition to it at all. So we'll go ahead and let that simmer and listen to it. And wait for it to get ready. Okay, so we're going to let it cook and eat lunch. So here's what it looks like midway through the process. The foam is starting to clear and you can see the bubbling that's going on. So we'll just let it continue at this rate and eventually it will stop bubbling. So we'll see how it becomes quiet, and at that point there's usually a little bit of a skim on the bottom. It'll almost look like it's burning on the bottom, but it's just some of the milk solids drop to the bottom. So we just wait for that point. When it stops bubbling, then we take it off the heat. It's complete at that point. So here's the ghee having cooked almost all the way. There are just a few little pops happening here. So you want to be very close to it at this point so that it doesn't burn. Because if you let it sit here too long, it will definitely burn. I hear people say sometimes, oh, ghee doesn't burn. But it does eventually. It will turn dark brown to black. We can just barely have a few pops happening, and as that stops, then I'm going to turn it off and take it off the heat and let it cool just a little bit. It's important not to leave the ghee sitting around with the lid off because it absorbs whatever is in the environment. So you let it cool just a little bit, enough where you can pour it into the jars. And use either an unbleached cheesecloth or a very fine colander sieve kind of thing, and pour it through that so that any of the chunks and pieces don't go into the jar as well. So I'm going to turn it off and just move it over a bit and let it sit. I put the jars into a bowl because I've had the experience of putting ghee that was not very hot at all, but the jar just wasn't quite tempered right, so it broke. And I had ghee running all down through my cabinets and that kind of thing. So I put it in a bowl to make sure that if that were to happen, then there wouldn't be a problem. Pouring it into 2 pint jars. So a pound of butter will fill a pint jar. And actually what has happened is that they're no longer pints anymore. So you can see there's a little bit of skim on the bottom, or a crusty kind of thing. And so you want to make sure to scrape that off and not put it down the drain, because I don't think it would work very well there. And that can all go into your compost. It's good to close it up right away. And keep ghee in the cupboard as long as you'd like. Actually, the older the better. It's important not to stick a wet utensil in there or anything with food on it, because then it will grow mold. But you do not keep ghee in the refrigerator at all. It actually, you wouldn't want to have it cold ever, because it would interfere with the qualities that it has to offer you. So try some ghee. You can use it when you're cooking your food, you can use it when you're baking, you can put it on food afterwards, and I think that you'll find it's a wonderful addition to your diet.